Hello, I'm Dan Gibson, and this is another question and answer video. Today's question was asked by Ali, who wonders, if Petra was the first Mecca, then where was Shib Abi Talib? This is an excellent question. Thank you, Ali. Let's start out by examining the story as related to us by Al-Tabari. This story takes place very early in Islamic history, when the number of Muslims was still very small. This takes place just after 83 Muslim men and 18 women had emigrated to Abyssinia over in Africa. The people who remained had hoped that the ruler in Abyssinia would send them gifts and arms, but this did not happen. It was then that the Quraysh tribe, who were the keepers of the holy area around the Kaaba building, they decided to take action against Muhammad and his few Muslims who were left with him. So they drew up a document stating that the Quraysh and others in the city could not marry Muslim women. They especially mentioned the Banu Hashim tribe and the Banu Muttalib tribe, nor could the people buy or sell from the Muslims. This document was then hung up in the Kaaba area for everyone to see. Very quickly, everyone else in the city joined into this boycott against the few remaining Muslims. So the Muslims retreated from the holy city into a nearby valley where they lived for about 3 years. It was a very hard time for them, and eventually they ran out of food. No one would sell them food, and the valley is known as Shib Abi Talib. The word Shib is a way through a narrow mountain with mountains on either side. It's different from a thania, which is just a pass-through. A Shib would be more like a canyon or a narrow valley. Shib Abi Talib has been known by other names as well, as Shib the Banu Hashim, and Shib Abu Yusuf, and Shib Ali bin Abi Talib. Some records tell us that Abdul al-Muttalib owned property in that valley or in that place, as well as Khadija, who lived there with the Prophet Muhammad. So, when the Muslims retreated back to their homes in this narrow valley, the people of the Quraysh came and barricaded the entrance and placed a guard there. So they were locked in. And as I said, for 3 years they suffered under this boycott until finally the boycott was lifted. Now, our question in this video is, if Petra is the original holy city of Islam, where would this valley be? It's a very good question. Remember, this would have to be a very special valley. It would be what we call in English a box canyon. A box canyon has one way to get in and no way to get out. So first of all, notice that the sides of the canyon were steep enough that the people couldn't climb out of it. And second, there was only one entrance into the canyon, and it was a very narrow entrance, and it was a narrow canyon. Some say that a camel had difficulty entering into this valley. So it's described as, and remember this, a long, narrow box canyon, steep sides, only one end open, and that is a very narrow entrance. And it was close to the city, within walking distance of the Kaaba. And there should be evidence of homes and dwelling places there, probably carved out of the rocks, since it was a narrow canyon and it was the home of Abdul Muttalib and of Muhammad and Khadija and so forth. Al-Rahiq al-Muqtamim also mentions, and I'll quote it, Abu Talib wisely and quietly took stock of the situation, decided to withdraw to a valley on the outskirts of Mecca. Banu Hashim and the Banu Muttalib, who followed suit, were thus confined within the narrow pass referred to as Shib of Abu Talib. From the beginning of Muharram, the 7th month of Muhammad's mission, until the 10th year, that is a period of 3 years. Now, just for fun, I read this description of the box canyon to some of my kids, and they're all adults now, but they spent their teenage years living in southern Jordan, and they knew all the areas around Petra as well as anybody could. And they all suggested the same place, as it was the only narrow box canyon that they knew of right close to Petra. But first, if we go to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, there is a place that has been called the Valley of Abu Talib. But it really isn't a box canyon with steep sides. But it is a canyon, and it is where people today remember the Valley of Abu Talib in Mecca. Today, however, much of this seems to have been demolished with the construction of a set of highway tunnels going right through the mountain. Now, what about Petra? Just a couple kilometers from Petra, there is a small box canyon. It has a very narrow entrance, so narrow that only one horse or camel can get through at a time. Today, the narrow gate is there. It's been built so it can be closed and locked, but it is still possible to get a horse through it. I know this because our film crew tested this with a single horse who passed through the entrance, and then he rode down through the canyon to the far side, and then he rode back. At the far end of the canyon, there's a set of steps that go up into a small hanging valley. There's no way down from that hanging valley unless you have ropes to rappel down the cliff. At the entrance of the box canyon, there is an old carved tomb, and some archaeologists feel that this may have been the original place for the Nabateans before they began to use the much larger Valley of Petra. In the box canyon, there are, as I said, some tombs, but the majority of things there are carved rooms that were used as dwellings. There are also a series of dining or feasting rooms there, complete with running water into large basins at the entrance. This canyon is known locally as Little Petra, but historically it's also been known as El Beidha, and it fits the description of Shib Abi Talib, or the Valley of Abu Talib, right down to the narrow canyon entrance. This valley could easily be sealed, and it would only take 1 or 2 guards to keep people boxed up in the canyon. Don't you think it strange that there is a place in Petra that fits the description of Shib Abi Talib perfectly? And what is more, Little Petra, as it is known today, would have made a perfect place for Khadija to run her merchant business from. Just outside of Little Petra is an excellent place for camel caravans to load and to unload. The narrow canyon provided rock-cut rooms where goods could be stored. A single guard at the entrance could guard the entrance to that valley. And right outside the entrance there was the start of fields and agriculture, where fodder could be provided for the animals. Until an inscription is found at the site, there's no way of knowing 100% that this is Shib Abi Talib, but it does fit the description better than the place in Mecca, known today as Shib Abi Talib in Mecca. And besides, every mosque in the first 100 years of Islam faced the Kaaba monument just a couple kilometers away. I'm convinced that Petra is the holy city of Islam, and every time someone asks about a location that was supposed to be near Mecca, a perfect location near Petra can be found to match the description. I'm Dan Gibson, and this has been another question and answer video.